this point, we could all go home. I was down in New York a few weeks ago, and I went down to Zuccotti Park. And when they heard that I was from Vermont, there was this palpable sigh that went through the crowd, and they all said, "Oh, Bernie." And then they said, "Can you get him to come talk to us?" And I said, "I'll try." And when I got back to Burlington, I went to the Burlington office, and, you know, his chief of staff was there, and we sat and talked for 20 minutes, and I don't know whether Bernie's gone down, but he's their patron saint. And the fact that we live here in a place where I could say, yeah, I'll pop by my senator's office, I'll see what I can do. Pretty amazing thing. By the way, I got asked for the description for this talk long before I ever wrote it. So please release your expectations. We're all saying the same thing here today. We're just all saying it in different ways, and I think we need to hear it over and over again because our hearts and our wills do need so much bolstering and so much encouragement. And you know, I often get brought in to do these talks when presenters feel like they've got a pointed yet slightly inchoate need for something. Often they're not quite sure what. Not something informative, exactly, or even something practically useful, which is good because I'm more of a big idea gal, and I have no idea how practically useful I can be to anybody. And I know I'm being brought in partly for the entertainment value, but I also know that whatever speech I come up with needs to be more than just entertaining. It needs to be inspiring, needs to have surprise and substance, sex appeal. I'm serious. You know, I met a Danish woman once who said to me, "The problem with climate change and peak oil is that they are not funny and they are not sexy. You have got to make them funny and you have got to make them sexy." So no pressure, right? The one thing I do know is that a good keynote needs some visuals. And I have been racking my brains for something that isn't PowerPoint. Because let's be honest, PowerPoint? And then recently I went to a concert being given by some performers from remote, low-lying Pacific Island nations, which are being rapidly inundated by rising sea levels. So you know that was a heartwarming and hopeful evening. One of the islands, Tuvalu, has been on my mind for years because, as Paul told you, I have this one-woman show that I do called The Boycott about the First Lady of the U.S. launching a sex strike to combat global warming. And one of the characters is a climate activist from Tuvalu. Now, before this concert, the only time I'd ever met an actual Tuvaluan was when I took my show to Copenhagen for those ill-fated UN climate talks. And Tuvalu had its own info booth. And the minute I saw it, I went up to the guy behind the counter and I said, "Hi, I am a big fan of your country." And I handed him a postcard for my show, which was a picture of two polar bears humping on a tiny ice floe in the middle of the ocean with a caption that read, "No sex please, we're melting." And it turned out that info booth guy was actually an official delegate. And he was there just to check his email, and he looked at me like I was a very small dog trying vigorously to mate with his leg. Now, fortunately, the performing Tuvaluans liked me better than official delegate guy. And they gave me this garland to prove it. A little atoll where one guy's grandfather used to live is completely gone. And someday, in the not-too-distant future, there won't be a Tuvalu anymore. And they all know it. The young man who gave me this garland said, "We are warriors. No matter how high the ocean gets, we'll stay. We will die for our country." I hugged him. And I made a big point of saying that I knew all about Tuvalu, and so did a lot of my friends, and we were thinking about them and doing our best to try and address this whole climate thingy. But he stopped me, and he said, it's not just us. It's everybody. And of course, he was right. I was a little embarrassed, because despite being a diehard climate activist and dedicating the bulk of my life to the cause, despite talking and thinking and writing and acting and organizing and blogging and Facebooking and tweeting about this all the damn time, I somehow managed to forget. I somehow had the luxury of forgetting, just for a moment, that it's all of us. It's everybody. It's you and me and everyone we know and everything we cherish. It's everything we hate, or which annoys us, or plagues us, or gives us indigestion or night sweats. It's everything. All our systems, assumptions, values. It's all our relationships, expectations, traditions. It's our sense of possibility. It's how we eat, how we work, travel, play, educate. It's what we learn, what we believe, what we dream of, what we choose to hold close, what we are forced to cast away. It's even our hope. Everything is going to change. Everything is already changing. Certainly, those of you from the more Irene-soaked portions of Vermont are pretty conscious of that. Now, as you can see, I am trying to be pointedly poetic here without getting into all the increasingly grim news from COP17 in Durban, or citing freak-out-worthy details from reports by the IPCC or the International Energy Agency. I mean, I could. If you don't behave yourselves, I might. But you're a pretty savvy bunch. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting here. Many of you are underpaid and or overworked professionals who deal with this stuff every day. Many of you are volunteers, willing to give up your free time to sit around kitchen tables on cold February nights and figure out how to retrofit your town hall or get your neighbors to change their light bulbs. And that is all, as our friend Jon Stewart would say, awesome! But I want to reframe or refocus our attention a little bit. Because what we've got going on right now is a major confluence of challenges and opportunities. It's an unprecedented historic moment which Vermont, and by Vermont I mean all of you, which Vermont is uniquely suited to address. First though, we need to lay out the context. Challenges. Well, there is the accelerating pace of climate change and our increasingly volatile and destructive weather systems. There's disrupted food production, infrastructure impact, millions of refugees, drought, ice melt, unraveling ecosystems, mass extinctions, the acidification of our rising oceans, etc., in some real, urgent, scary, bad. There's the destabilizing effect of peak oil and rampant, no-holds-barred, last-ditch fossil fuel development with mountaintop removal and tar sands and fracking and deep ocean drilling and gigantic untended spills. There's the political and economic power of the heavily subsidized, barely regulated fossil fuel industry, which is reaping more profits than any other industry in the history of money, and which pretty much has the US Congress, except for Bernie, in its back pocket. Or rather, I should say, which has Congress in his back pocket. Because the Supreme Court has told us that corporations are people, free to inject as much money as they want into our democratic process, and they do, and it works. There's our dominant economic model, based on principles of infinite growth, endless resource extraction, trashing of the commons, and operating on the assumption that we'll have cheap oil in perpetuity. There's also the paradigm that maximizing economic growth is the most important thing our society can accomplish. And we pretty much have carte blanche to do whatever it takes to achieve it. Whenever growth comes into conflict with any of our other values, we often tend to shrug our shoulders and say, it's just business, or it's for the economy.